and
I see
welcome
some
her. You
friends.
see it? There it is.
Mom.
I'm wearing them too. This is extra love.
Yeah, I see my mom and I saw my friend Eliza. Hi, Eliza. I saw a friend and student, Evan. Hi. It's nice.
You want to take a minute? Let's just take a minute and say hi to everybody we know. Hi, everybody.
It's just so interesting to see like faces in the crowd that that you know.
It's one of the sweet things about social media. I haven't been on in a long time, so hello everybody. It's nice to see familiar names and I was going to say familiar faces, but I guess we can't really see the faces.
Yeah.
And hello to the Brazilian. Hello, oi, querida. Okay, I could do this all day, but I want to dive right into what we're here to do, which is to celebrate your book, American Spy, a Cold War thriller, unlike any Cold War thriller that has ever come before it. That was a tongue twister. I'm going to turn up the comments now, everybody. I'll turn them on again at the end so you can say your goodbyes. But let's get this thing going. Turn off comments. Okay, cool. Lauren, hi.
Hello. In this very calm time.
Yeah, to this relaxing moment in history.
Yes.
You know, maybe we should just start with that. Okay, let's back it up a little bit. I want to give some people some context. In case you don't know who I'm talking to Lauren Wilkinson. She is a first-time novelist, and I need to discuss how patently unfair it is that as a first-time novelist, you were able to write a book as good as this. But I also know that you earned it, because I know that it took you around 7 years to write it, and no small blood, sweat, and tears. So when we get to the portion where we talk about the craft of writing, I'm going to want to dig into that. But this is a novel that is so searingly good and so intelligent and was on the best of lists of nearly every publication in America in 2019 when it was published. Also, to drop a name, is on Obama's best read list, which we will also have to get into. What does that feel like? And it's a Cold War thriller, but to call it that diminishes everything else that it is. It's the story of a woman. Your character's name is Marie Mitchell. She is a Black woman in the 1980s who is working for the FBI. Her father was a cop. Her sister had always dreamed of becoming a spy, and she'd always sort of been around a sense of espionage and secrecy, connected with law enforcement in tangential ways. Anyway, she joins the FBI. She's talented, she's brilliant, she's ambitious, and she keeps getting passed over for promotions and for good jobs simply because she's a Black woman. It's an old boys network. There's just, it's so obvious that she's going to be given dumb assignments for the rest of time, which is incredibly frustrating to her. Even though she has an optimism at the beginning that she's going to be able to work around it, it becomes increasingly clear that that's just not possible, no matter how smart she is. It's just her boss is never going to let that happen. Around that time, she gets approached by the CIA, by an operative for the CIA, an intelligence officer, seeing if they can recruit her to get close to a man named Thomas Sankara, who is the real life president of the West African country of Burkina Faso, and a very charismatic, powerful, brilliant young leader with a lot of love in his country, who the CIA was very nervous about because of his pro-communist ideology. They want her to get close to him, basically in order to have a honeypot operation. Mm-hmm. She agrees to do it. There's another storyline about her sister. There's a lot of mystery around what happened to her sister at the end of her sister's life. And she's been promised information about it if she can deliver for the CIA. So she takes the assignment. That is the essence of the story, and then finds out that she's not necessarily working for who she thinks she's working for.
Yeah, that was great. I mean, they always ask you to do a synopsis, and it's the most impossible thing to do your own synopsis. But I'll ask you. I'll send you a message, Lauren, for my next book. Please give me a synopsis for this.
I do this out of mercy because I've been interviewed a million times, and people have always asked me to synopsis this book, and I'm like, I don't know.
I don't know. It's the most,
I like it. I like it so much better when they do it.
Yeah. It's a direct question. What's your book about? But it's like really, really hard.
Very hard. But this book, and the reason that I think it captures the imagination and stimulates the intellect in a way that surpasses genre, I think this is the definition of a genre busting book, is because of the underlying themes of race and gender that infiltrate every single page of this story. And that's where I want to begin, even though I also want to talk about current events. Let's go back to the 1980s. So the book is set in the 1980s. It's during the height of the Cold War. One of the things that you did so brilliantly in this book was to bring back what it felt like to be a young person during the Cold War. Now, you were not a young person during the Cold War. You're a young person now.
Yeah, but, I could make some guesses. I mean, I do think that, we got pretty close in terms of apocalypse at the Bay of Pigs, and I think, for an entire generation of people, there was like this terror was imprinted on them. I think being 6 or 7 and knowing that the world is getting very, very close to nuclear war and feeling like you yourself are in trouble, that I feel that had to have been traumatizing. And I think it kind of, we see the effects, I think, of that trauma today, because there is this real, like people just, anything that even like a whiff of communism or like any, it's like there's people sort of shut down. And I think, I think it has, I think that time caused such a psychic wound that really makes sense to me.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, created a culture that's so terrified of the Cuban Missile Crisis that it won't give healthcare to its population.
I mean, I'm trying to kind of be as generous, or trying to follow the emotions as much as I can, because it is something where it just on its face, it's like, why won't we do this? Is this selfishness? Is this like, what is the happening here? You know, and I don't know, it feels almost like a question of branding. That is just that any alignment with like this ideology that was demonized for generations and was like created just this terror, I think, in a whole generation is, we're seeing the repercussions now for sure.
I think that's a very strong point, and it speaks to the intelligence that this book contains about the moral ambiguity of nearly everybody involved, and also the moral ambiguity of all the ideologies in the book. And Marie grows up really saturated in moral ambiguity, more than I think your normal child would be. You can feel that from an early age she's aware that the world is a dangerous place and a divisive place, and that things are not necessarily what they seem, and it's not safe for things to be what they seem. Partially, I think, you make clear that this is partially just growing up Black in America, but it's also because her father's a police officer, and there's a lot of ambiguity discussed there in the book about what it meant for him to be a Korean War veteran who fought for his country and then came back and had to deal with his lack of civil rights. And why would somebody like that enter the police force and become an arm of the law, the very law that had kept his community so oppressed? And that's one level of the ambiguity. Another level of the ambiguity is that his father's one of his father's friends is a guy named Mr. Ali, who is an informant for the FBI, who's been charged with spying on civil rights activists, but is also you feel, a good man and a good family friend who later helps Marie get her first posting in the FBI. Complicated character, to say the least, who introduces complicated themes to the book at a very early start. Can you talk about where the inspiration for him came from, and also why you decided to have Marie come from a law enforcement family?
Yeah. So the inspiration for her father came from my grandfather, who was a Korean War vet, and he came back and joined the police force in New York, and actually he retired the year I was born, 1984, as a deputy police commissioner. So he kind of rose through the ranks, and that tension, that exists in the book, the moral ambiguity around that choice, is one that I was looking into, because I knew that because I knew from personal experience that there are no easy answers. And I feel like those are the things that I want to tell stories about, where everybody is, you don't get to really just say, okay, well, everyone's good or everyone's bad.
Right.
And, I like to just I think maybe make it more difficult for myself. And then the inspiration for John Ali, I think, well, I know that just as a history, well, I wouldn't say buff, but as for someone who enjoys history, reading about
clearly,
I knew that
right.
Some of the FBI, that was true, that there were a lot of Black FBI officers, or agents early on, that they really were just being used in COINTELPRO. And I was like, oh, how, what must that have felt like to sort of be just kind of undermining civil rights that are supposed to be, helping you out. I just don't, it feels like that had to have been some really complicated personal arithmetic that people, were trying to do to justify that to themselves. I think so. Yeah, I was attracted to, just true stories and then fictionalizing them, because the truth is always so difficult. So that's where my inspiration came from for both.
Yeah, and a good novel should be filled with complicated characters. At all levels, or else it's too, especially in a thriller, it's too boring for us as the reader if we're given these really simple polarities, to be able to, as much as the 80s were about that, as much as the 80s were about, in America, a storyline of simple polarity, which is, we're good, they're bad. And anybody who's even remotely associated with them is bad, and anybody who's even remotely associated with us is good, despite a lot of stories that that called that into question, and a lot of manipulation in countries that we'll get to that in a minute. Because that's a big theme of the book as well. You also throw us very quickly, when Marie starts working at the FBI, one of her assignments is to get informants, and I found that one of the most moving moments in the book was the conversation that she has with a young informant of hers named Aisha, who she's been cultivating for information about possible Black separatist movements in Harlem. Basically just looking to see what's going on, and she's supposed to be reporting. And it's such a devastating scene because this is a young woman, not even 20, a single mother with a child whose partner is in jail, and in order to in exchange for a lessened jail sentence, Aisha has become an informant for the FBI. And it's very similar to what Mr. Ali is. It's somebody who's being paid to report on people who they're close to. And there's something so heartbreaking. There's a moment there where Marie sees her sort of woman to woman, person to person, sees her, with her toddler, and you can see that already she's starting to have, real doubts about, one, the efficacy of this. She ends up firing her as an informant because she's not getting any information from her, because she's just a kid. This isn't somebody who's a threat to the United States. But what it signaled for me when I read that was your deep awareness of the importance of relationships between people in this book, real human relationships. And that's something that I think is another reason that this is a genre busting book, is because that's not often important in thrillers. We don't know who James Bond was related to, what his relationship with his parents were, who he cared about and loved. Marie is deeply enmeshed in webs of relationships that are not simple, and that are sometimes heartbreaking. So I wanted to know if you could speak to how you figured out how to bring that into the book, or is that just natural for you?
Well, I wish it was natural. I think that is not it, because it took me so long to write this. But the idea that you're talking about just about how you use informants or assets or whatever. I mean, I was very inspired by, again, the real life, particularly by CIA memoirs, because the most honest ones really talk about what it is to have an asset. Because and the most honest ones really are like, this is about cultivating a relationship with someone, and really getting them to in a lot of cases risk their life for your cause. Right. And it's like, that's a very for me, that's a very charged thing. That's a big ask. And I think
Yeah.
for me, like,
Yeah.
you know, and I think that that just kind of thinking about these things on the human level, it really changes one's perspective, I think, on like American foreign policy and what it is that, like, you know, we have like a general sense of what the CIA does in the world, but like the CIA, that's like it's human intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
What CIA officers do, they do not run around with guns. What they do is they like recruit people, and they get them to, and they get them to give information. And a lot of that is, you know, it can be perceived as kind of an exploitative relationship, you know. And so I think that for me, I really wanted Marie to be put in the position to have that kind of relationship with someone who she could identify with, who she could see the vulnerability in, because I think, you know, that's I don't know, I mean, I think that that's where the challenge lies in that kind of work. And, you know, I know that with genre more, people want to see the running and gunning and the, you know, James Bond walks in the room and everyone knows who he is, which is crazy because makes him a terrible spy. Right. At his job. But, you know, but I do think that the idea of spying, the idea of gathering intelligence, you know, human intelligence, like really is a good overlay for, you know, just interaction and like, you know, how you see yourself versus how the world sees you. I feel like the spy genre in general is like a perfect genre in which to talk about identity, because like so much, it's so, you know, foundational to the work that CIA officers do, and that's the thing that attracted me. So it felt for me like, you know, I wrote the book with this idea like, oh, this is an oversight in how we are thinking about the spy. I want to kind of dig into the emotional stuff that I think is interesting, you know, but I'll put it in like a genre jacket. I'll make the first chapter there be very exciting, so I can, you know, trick people, get them get their butts in the seats with the action, and then trick them into thinking about feelings.
And politics and race and gender. Yeah, this is what you've done is what I like to call a bran muffin disguised as a chocolate cupcake. You know, it's like, I'm just going to frost it. You know, I mean, starting the book the way you did, and I have to say, the first 6 paragraphs of your book are the best opening to a book that I have read in so long. I mean, talk about like starting with a bang. You know, like the book begins with our character Marie. We don't know who she is. We don't know anything about her. She's a suburban mom in her house with her kids in the middle of the night. Hears a noise. There's an intruder. They have a brief tussle, and then she kills him with his own gun very quickly. You know, like it's so straightforward. And I felt like it was also so, in a way realistic about the violence, because instead of having a long drawn out kind of macho, you know, 10-page action scene, it's just who got the hands on the gun first, and now this guy's dead. And within a few pages, she's gathered up her kids with fake passports, and they're on their way to escape the United States because she knows she's being hunted. And anybody who can read those 6 paragraphs and not want to read the rest of the book, you do a very good job luring us into the book, because it's because we don't know who she is or who she's running from or who's tried to kill her and whose kids these are, because she said that she's not told them who their father is. And yeah, it's well done, madam. You know, one of the things I always try to say, and I try to do it in my books too, but I always try to, when I'm reading people's books, is you need a beginning that says to the reader, I dare you to stop reading. Because every first couple pages is sort of an audition when you're auditioning for the attention of the reader. And yeah, you got it.
Yeah, you know, because it is, I think that that's really a really good way to think about it. Just that it is an audition, and there are so many things vying for people's time right now. You know, it's like, it's not the 19th century anymore. If someone is going to spend, this is 300 pages, you know, it's not, there are so many things, you know, a movie can tell you a story in like 120 minutes. Like, this is going to take a long time, and I like, you know, and I really respect, and love. And I'm so happy to have readers who are just like, you know what, I'm going to commit that time to you. You know, I like this story. I like where you've started us, and I'm going to go with you, and I'm going to trust you with my time, which is like the most finite resource, you know, in an age where, like, you know, I find myself just scrolling and distracted all the time.
As we all do. And that is also by design. But you know, I want to say, going back to the beginning of the book, I love the origin story of this. I've listened to a few interviews with you, and I wonder if you would share with everybody the origin story of this novel, because I've never heard an origin story quite like this for where this novel came from. And so please share.
A homework assignment. So if you
literally a homework
assignment. Don't, you know, if you listen, if someone gives you a homework assignment, you never know where it's going to take you. It was assignment in grad school. So my professor at the time was John Freeman, and the class was called Suburban.
And sorry, this is you getting your MFA in creative writing?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify, put the setting of what you were studying.
Yeah, you know, it's just like no contest. I'm just like going in. So please, yes, I always thank you. Please, I need
I'll provide the exposition. You provide the drama. Okay, let's go.
Thank you. This is a good dynamic. But again, I like need to tap you for just regular life. It's like, this is just, I need that too. So yes, but MFA grad school, the class was called Suburbia and American Unhappiness, and the assignment was, we were supposed to write a story that was based in the suburbs, but that didn't include any of the kind of cliches, you know. And we'd read like Richard Yates, we'd read, you know, Revolutionary Road, we'd read some of the Johns, John Cheever.
I was about to say that you're not going to get away with not reading John Cheever if you're writing about suburban happiness.
Yeah, you know, it was like that sort of middle class, ennui, white suburban, you know, like very specific American look at the suburbs at the time. And so, you know, I saw a suburban housewife, and then I saw someone in my mind, and then I saw someone attempt to put, you know, her on, like, you know, like try to assassinate her. And I knew from the beginning that it was an assassination. And I was like, but why? You know, like, why? And every time I just asked myself that question, why, it kept coming back that she was spying somehow in the past. And every time I asked myself who she was, the most interesting answer was always that she was a spy. But then, you know, the work of actually having to write it out came after that. You know, I was like, oh, that's a good idea. And then I was like, oh, now I have to write it.
I just love that this grew out of an assignment that was that before you knew anything about what West African leader she was hired by a shadow agency outside of the CIA to murder, you had her being assassinated in her bedroom. I love how these things grow, and the reason I wanted to point this out is a lot of people who are watching this are writers or aspiring writers, and one of the things that I like to do with these interviews is to show as much as possible like how the sausage gets made, and to show that you don't need to have a fully formed idea before you begin creating something. In fact, very rarely does one have a fully formed idea before one begins to create. There's a tremendous act of faith, I think, in taking just a vision. All you had was a vision of a suburban housewife fighting for her life from an assassin in the middle of the night, and then it's on you to trust that enough to go take 7 years. Did everybody hear that? 7 years to create the story of who she is and why somebody's trying to kill her. So
it's hard. You have to have that faith. You have to gamble on yourself. Is kind of how it felt for me. And you know, at the end of the day, like, I had doubts and I was I lacked in confidence, but I think I've always felt like, okay, I'm a good gamble. You know, like if it's just like if you think of it, if you break it down to hours in the day, I can spend that hour working for someone else, or I can spend it working on something that I enjoy for myself, and in the hope that in the future this will be something. But, you know, other than, you know, it felt really risky. It felt really scary to kind of to be thinking that way. But that's kind of, at the end of the day, I was just like, you know, it also a little bit feels like Wile E. Coyote in the you know, the cartoons, where you're running and and as long as you don't look down, as long as you don't really think about what it is that you're doing, you can kind of you can get to the other cliff. It felt a little bit like that for me too. Yeah.
I get that
thing to do.
I get that. It's such a weird thing to do. I mean, creativity is such a profoundly weird thing to do, because what you're doing is you're taking, you mentioned earlier that time is the one, you know, the most precious and non-renewable resource that everybody has. And when you start a project, what you're doing, especially as you were, as somebody who was a student, and not, you know, not a career writer at that point, what you were doing was saying, I'm going to take the one most precious resource of my life, my time, and I'm going to give it into making something that nobody wants, that nobody has asked for.
No one is waiting for it. No one cares if you produce it. Yeah.
It is such a weird thing to do. You could be doing so many other things with your time.
It is. And
it's such a weird
arrogant in this way. I think at the time I felt like, you know, how dare I that I should be able to treat my time as if it's my own. And then I think I thought about that, like what that means.
Right.
And I think that a lot of us are kind of conditioned to think that you know, how dare you feel entitled to your own time? So I kind of, you know, I'm still not, you know, it feels like there's a level of social conditioning there that I would like to deconstruct, but I'm still not sure. How deep to go.
And I would add, there's an extra layer, a very thick and sinister extra layer of that on a Black woman as well. Like, you know, how dare you own your own time? How dare you own your own labor? How dare you own your own creativity? So it's a, you know, it's a book about revolution. I'd say it's a revolutionary arrogance to have, to say that, why not me? In the same way that your character Marie's sister, Helene, at the beginning of the book, as a young girl, has this kind of radical self-assurance that her younger sister looks up to so much and doesn't have ever throughout the entire book, of this sense of her right to, not only her right to exist, but her right to do whatever she wants with her life. And then her right to do whatever she wants on her own terms. And so as a child, she gets really interested in spying and spycraft and spy stories. And, you know, it's the Cold War. There's a lot of that going on, but it's not as though anybody was walking around saying to little Black girls, you know, you're allowed to be part of this story, you know, but Helene was like, I want to be part of this story. And at some point says, I want my own spy agency. And which is such a fascinating plot twist, and she becomes the reason, one of the reasons I think that Marie becomes a spy. There's a level at which Marie is a very unlikely candidate for this line of work. She herself describes herself and thinks of herself as the less brave sister, the less interesting sister. There's a couple scenes that establish that really beautifully. One where her father takes his daughters hunting, and she's incapable of dealing with seeing the deer die and gutting it, but her sister's got no problem with it. And there's another where her sister very cunningly waits for her moment to beat up a bully, befriends a bully in order to get her trust so that she can time the beating of retribution that needed to be coming, you know. And you see that her sister's just so much more obviously the person who should be in this line of work than Marie. And I wondered why you chose to create a protagonist who is not an obvious fit for the job of being either an FBI agent or a CIA intelligence officer.
Because I really wanted her to be unlikely, because I wanted her to have to really think about everything. You know, like, it's just like there's no unconsidered patriotism really in the book. There's no, you know, she has to earn everything. She has to earn all of her choices. And I don't know, that just felt right. to me, that felt like the story I wanted to tell, because, you know, I wanted to be thinking about, you know, I wanted Marie to be thinking, should I be um, in these institutions, working in these institutions that don't really want me there, that aren't really serving me? Like, why am I doing this? You know, like I wanted that to be the conversation, instead of like the more genre-y, oh, there's no question about
Right.
why I'm doing this. You know, because I think that I don't think everyone gets the benefit of that. There's no question about why I'm doing this. That there's, you know, a lot of people assume that their institutions are working for them, but there are a lot of other people who don't. And
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to, and that was just where my interest is. You know, as a reader, as a writer, and as a person, I'm more interested in articulating that kind of voice, as opposed to one that feels very confident about what they are owed by society, I guess.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a line in the beginning of her career at the FBI where she's realizing, you know, I mean, not that she was innocent and didn't expect this, but she's realizing the deep extent of the sexism and the racism that's keeping her from being able to advance. And in order to survive in that climate, she says, to get by, I told my colleagues that I didn't care about politics, which seemed like a ridiculous thing to claim. They bought it, though. Very few of those men, all of them white men, understood having no choice about whether they were politicized or not. Unlike me, they weren't people who'd had their existence politicized on their behalf. I thought that was such a great line, one, because of what it sheds light on the experience I think and can only assume of many, if not all, Black people in America. But I also felt that it shows us this aspect of Marie that I think is essential to her character, which is that she's been living a double life for a very long time. And this is what made the book sort of stand out in startling 3D to me, when I realized why it makes so much sense that a Black woman would be the best spy in the entire world, because to take a woman who comes from a race and a gender that tends to make them be invisible within culture is, of course she would be a natural spy, and somebody who's used to having to have a double life in order to stay safe. And everybody, I realized as the book goes on, you very subtly but very clearly explain that everybody in Marie's family has been living a double life. Her mother was so light-skinned as to pass for white for a long time. And you write about her so light-skinned that she moved in and out of the New York places where Negroes were interdit, gathering her intelligence on the world that white people inhabited. So her mother was an intelligence officer for her own survival in the 1940s in New York. And then her father says at one point, her father, the police officer, says, I've been a spy in this country for as long as I can remember. This is such, it just makes me think, why hasn't somebody written this book before? Because it just feels, and you begin your book with James Baldwin from Invisible Man saying that he's been a spy in the enemy's country, as he says, since I gave up my gun back in Reconstruction. How did you, I mean, it's not so much a question as how did you think of this? I guess the question is, how come this hasn't already been done? Because it just feels like such a natural fit.
It felt really natural to me. And I think probably things having to do with more the genre and more people, and maybe, like, you know, the voices that are traditionally excluded from it more than anything. You know, because it did, like, you know, the metaphor, like the racial metaphor and the things I wanted to be talking about in terms of society, that came to me first as oh, this makes sense in the context of spying. And then after, I was like, oh, I have to, like, read a lot of books, because I haven't really been up on this genre. Like, A, to see, like, if other people have been doing this, and B, to see, like, what is being written, you know, but it just felt like, it felt very clear to me, you know. So, I mean, the epigraph, the Invisible Man, the Ellison thing, like, you know, that's like the protagonist is his grandfather, who he thinks of as like really obsequious, he on his deathbed he reveals that he's felt like he's been a spy, and
Right.
the narrator for the whole thing, he can't quite reconcile these two things. Like, how could he have been a spy? You know, like
Yeah.
how could that? And I feel that my book, all of the characters are kind of circling that same question, that same,
Yeah.
how do I get these two things?
Yeah.
You know, these two things that seem contradictory. This, like, I feel like thematically, whatever is the grandfather was saying, I think that all of the characters kind of have some sort of relationship with
Yeah.
everyone in Marie's family, certainly. Yeah, you know, like her mother being able to pass, I think, is the most obvious one. But I do think well, maybe Marie actually literally being a spy is the most obvious one. But I do think, but her father, you know, as well. I think it's like, you know, because I think that he's saying, I think his has to do with class as well. You know, like, he's saying, I wanted to, you know, I kind of became a cop. I have been able to give my family a middle-class lifestyle, but I've never forgotten who I am and what this country is. And I think that that's what he means when he's saying it. So, you know, I think that they all, I don't know, they're all complicated.
We read Brittany Cooper earlier this year, and in her book she talked about how the military has always been a pathway for Black men to be able to have power in a country that strips them of power, and but the complication of that, where now you're a tool of violence, you're being used as a tool of violence for the very culture that has kept you and your family members oppressed for so long. And yet this is a way where you can actually be allowed to carry a gun, allowed to have authority, allowed to maybe even have authority over white men. It's just been a pathway to that, and that comes with its own I can't even begin to unwind the scheme of complications that brings. So what happens in your novel is that Marie is recruited by the CIA. She takes the job for a multitude of reasons. Well, one, it feels like, is that she's also been put on probation at the FBI for doing some things behind her boss's back. So she's kind of bored and out of work. I think she also wants to be given an exciting assignment. This is what she went into this field for. She also goes into it because she's been promised information on her sister. So essentially what you see happening in the book, the way I saw it, is that in the same way that she was using Aisha, the young woman who's the informant at the beginning of the novel, to gather information for her superiors, she's now being used to get close to Thomas Sankara. And of course, she has a lot of moral questions about that, but her need to find out about her sister, and I think also her ambition, it causes her to say yes to the assignment, and maybe even her wanting to live, like wanting to do something dangerous, which she does end up doing. Can you talk about Thomas Sankara, just to give us a synopsis of who he was, why we don't know of him? He's somebody who I didn't know about, and I've read so many reviews and interviews with you. It appears that very few people have ever heard of him, or maybe have never even heard of Burkina Faso, the country that he was the president of. Certainly maybe didn't know about the CIA assassination of him in the 80s, where he was replaced by somebody that the Americans chose, who is still in office. And the Americans had said they wanted to get rid of him so they could have a two-party system, but meanwhile their candidate has been in office for the last 30 years, so much for that.
Yeah, I made that up. I mean, there's no of that, but I took that from but there is proof that the CIA was involved it helped engineer Lumumba's assassination in 1960. 60, 59.
Oh, okay. So I don't
Yeah.
I don't want to give us, I don't want to say we did something we didn't do, but
Yeah,
so I'll let you clarify.
But I do feel that it was
It's the kind of stuff we do.
extremely plausible. Exactly. Like, you know, like there's no proof, but
Okay, got it. Sorry, my correction. See, this is how compelling you. This is why your book is so compelling, that I actually thought that was true.
Yeah. There's no proof, but there's no proof that it didn't happen.
Got it.
So, yeah.
Seems more likely that it did than that it didn't.
I feel like, you know, I mean, when Mandela came, he was kept into the U.S. He was kept under surveillance. So it feels like the United States had the things that we do know that happened is suggestive of the things that we don't know happened, but probably did. Fingers in a lot of pies.
Yeah, and the language that the CIA, we find out maybe not necessarily CIA operative and intelligence officer uses to describe certainly sounds like American foreign policy at that time. You know, saying that this is a young country who they really don't have the maturity yet to choose their own leaders. You know, so we're just going to go ahead and do that for them.
It's like even a bold statement now.
Yeah, even though they love this guy, you know, they're really not responsible enough yet. We're just going to just patronize them a little bit more on that. So yeah, tell me about Sankara. When did you? Okay, so your books, you know, the genesis for your book is this writing assignment in college saying write about the suburbs. So you've got this woman, and there's an assassin in her kitchen or in her whereabouts. How do you get from there to Thomas Sankara and Burkina Faso? How did that happen?
I think it was just like a mashup. So, you know, I think so the assignment came from in grad school, and I think the first time I read about Sankara was, you know, as an undergrad. And I was just like, this is such a fascinating person. And I had the same question you did, which is, why don't more Americans know who he is? You know, like we do know Che, and there are so many parallels between them in terms of they were very young and they were very charismatic, the motorcycle, you know, like there are parallels. And I don't know why. I have my theories, but I don't know why he is not better known in this country. So
why is he not a dorm room poster, and why is he not a T-shirt? Actually, I would love to hear those theories if you don't mind sharing them.
I mean, just basic racism.
Like just I had a feeling
sort of like just
might have a
little lack of desire to know about other countries in the world, particularly you know, those in West Africa. So, and particularly it may be a story that is not, you know, the most easy to digest story for the American, like, you know, like we want Africa to look a certain way, and so we can just process it, chew it, you know, it's over. Like and my narrative and my understanding remains, you know, the same. But I think that you know, thinking about Marxist African leaders, thinking about Pan-Africanism, like it sort of gets into a place where you're like, oh, this complicates the narrative. So, you know, and I so things that I guess is like that's maybe that's sort of my working.
That sounds like a very extremely plausible reason that we haven't heard of Thomas Sankara.
Yeah, so he was, you know, he was like he was the leader he was a Marxist revolutionary. He was the leader in the early 1980s. He was, you know, responsible for a lot of improvement in a very short period of time. He really was, you know, ushered in a golden age, which included you know, all these programs that included vaccinating children, trying to stop the you know, the desert from kind of, you know, planting trees to stop the encroachment of the desert. Literacy programs, like he understood that the onerous debt that a lot of countries are under is really a shackle. You know, it's that debt is like a new type of, yeah, it's not, that debt is very dangerous.
Yeah.
And he was very explicit about saying that.
And you use his words directly in this book, right? Like or his ideology, at least, when he's a character who, you know, we meet him and he has a human life as well, and an intimate life and a love story with Marie. But I read that you were very careful to make sure that you were true to his.
Yeah, I didn't want to put words in his mouth. So all of the, you know, all of the things that I said that he does, he really did, and everything that, you know, everything that he says publicly, like as a speech or something, is based on real speeches that he gave, you know, and some of them, just speaking to the difficulty of people not really knowing who he is, you know, he's a francophone as well, so my French is so I was, you know, having to translate some of that stuff myself was another reason why it took so long.
It took 7 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, I guess probably I wanted him in the story because I had a little bit of a historical crush, you know, and I was like, and I wanted to see him. I wanted to kind of bring this person who I do admire, into a novel. But, you know, I do think that the other, you know, the things that I start to say at the end, where it kind of, you know, he starts to be more take more of a hold to firing unions and, or, you know, like banning unions, firing teachers, trying to suppress the press. You know, it's like it feels like there are a couple of people who kind of follow that pattern, who have that great intentions and really are productive and helpful and really good leaders, but there's a lot of, you know, it takes a long time to make, you know, it takes a lot of strength to kind of keep pushing through social policy like that when you are in conflict with the elite in a country, which he was. So
yeah, and there's I think you're clear that there's no telling that what he might have become had he stayed. You know, would he become would he become a dictator, or would he become a liberator?
You know, it's
we don't know. We didn't get a chance to find out because he accidentally died.
Yeah.
So, you know, Marie, one of the things I felt was a theme in this book is how we end up as what we are. You know, Marie ends up in law enforcement and then becoming an intelligent officer. And I never quite got the feeling, like, her discomfort with it, which is part of the sort of the good drama of the book, you know, and the conflict of the book, you know, is her own lack of comfort in that role. You know, she's doing it because it's a family business in a way, because it's something that her sister and her father were both involved in. She's doing it as a career in the same way that Mr. Ali did and got his corner office, you know, and I was thinking about how so much of why she did it was because it was what her big sister always wanted to do and always wanted to be, and she kind of wanted to carry that legacy forward. And that was very moving to me because I always say that I'm a writer because my sister was a writer. My older sister was a writer long before I was, when we were children, and I just wanted to be like her. And I imitated her, and that's how I became that. And I wondered how you became what you are. What was your path to becoming a writer? And
I was one of those kids who read all the time. So that was probably a big part of it, that I wanted to be a writer because I loved books so much. You know, I was raised an only child, although I met my sister when I was in my 20s, my half sister. So, you know, I spent a lot of time reading in worlds. I think that I first had a interaction with someone who was like, "Oh, you're good at this," when I was a teenager. And kind of always liked reading. I mean, liked writing. rather. Did it as an undergraduate student as well, did workshops. But even up until I graduated from Columbia, I still wasn't convinced that I was going to be able to do it professionally. I really didn't think so. Even while I was writing the book, I wasn't sure that it was a thing that I was just going to have as a profession. Like I took classes in science and math, actually, because I was at the same time that I was in grad school, I was also working as a medical assistant. And I thought maybe, I could just kind of keep moving up to maybe become a nurse and then also just keep writing on the side, but have a stable career.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
And you were thinking that even as you were at an Ivy League university getting your MFA in creative. Okay.
That university is incredibly expensive. I just felt like I'm about to leave this place with a lot of debt, and I'm going to need to, and as we were talking about, no one is asking me for the book. Right. Like, it's not like there's any guarantee that I'm.
By the way, I think this is very wise and prudent. I want to let everybody know. Like, I said that in a sort of playful way, but I'm a big advocate of people who are aspiring artists and writers having a job. I actually think it also can make your writing better at times.
I think so too. So, because you have to. There are a couple of different elements to writing. It's the ability to write, but you also have to have something to write about.
Right. You have to know some stuff.
And have had experiences, or at least have opinions on things. So and if you haven't really lived, how do you do that? I know people who just their imaginations are so strong that they can just kind of do that, but I'm not one of them.
Me neither.
So I've been interested in writing and loved writing forever, but really wasn't thinking career.
Yeah.
Because also, you never know. You don't know how a book is going to do. You have no idea how a book's going to do.
Let's talk about how this book is done.
No idea what it's going to do. So you don't know if it's going to be a flop, and then you have spent that time that same 7 years. I mean, you're always going to have that time was always going to pass no matter what. So I'm glad, even if it had been a flop, I would have been glad that I spent it writing, but terrified, I'm very glad that people responded well to it.
I mean, this is a question that is probably really annoying to answer, but I can't help myself from asking. I think it's a lazy interviewer's question, but okay. What has it been like seeing the reception, the critical acclaim, the warmth and the respect with which this book was received?
It feels good in theory, but in practice, like, I stay away from, like, my mom will send me things, and I appreciate her for doing that, because I wouldn't necessarily go. I've gone Googling myself before.
Don't do it.
It's not a thing to do.
Don't
do it. In any way sensitive, or if you had, like, just a book go out into the world and feeling like a layer of your skin is gone, which is how I felt. I felt so exposed in those months right after the book came out. And so I'm, happy. I'm happy, and I am glad that it's been translated. Because I know what that means, but it's like, in terms of actually reading anything that people are writing about,
don't do it.
Because I also know how I am.
I'll tell you, though, that they love you. I'll tell you that they love you, but don't go looking. Don't go. I used to say I don't Google my own name for the same reason that I don't drink bleach, which used to have a whole different level of meaning before Trump. But anyway. I have to find a different way to say that. The same reason I don't eat broken glass, it's a very dangerous thing to do.
It is. Yeah. Also, you can really be, or I can be someone who, it can be a nice comment, and then someone has like one critical line, and I'll think about that part, and but like, we all do.
Yeah, it's not just you.
That's the person's right, like that. Yeah. So I can't change it. I can't, like, so I just am like, it's none of my business.
You're a wise and emotionally healthy woman, far beyond your young years. as I was reading it, of course, I kept thinking, and everyone I talked to who read it was like, when is the movie? When is the movie? And I've heard that you did sell the rights to, not to a movie, but to British TV. Is there anything that you can tell us about what's happening with that?
Yeah,
First of all, congratulations.
Thank you. So I'm not writing it.
That's also wise.
Yeah, at the time they asked me, and I just thought, oh no, I can't do that. You know, I've since like started working in writing in TV, and realized that, you know, I was feeling intimidated, and maybe it is something I can do, but at the time I was like, I can't. But the writer, her name is Abby, and I actually have met her a few times. She is really great. And so I feel like very optimistic about whatever she's writing, because she's really smart. Now, I have never seen it. I don't know what's happening, but I do trust her. So that's a nice feeling, you know, like just
the Brits tend to do good TV. This is exciting.
I hope to see it.
I hope to see it too. I hope to see it too, because it's, I mean, you've done, whoever the team is that's putting it together, you've done them a great service by writing a book that, you know, scene for scene, page for page would translate beautifully to the screen. And I also wanted to ask you about your new endeavor of writing for television. I'm very fascinated by TV writing because it's collaborative. And I have friends of mine, novelist friends of mine, that I've sat around and talked about, like, what would it be like to create in a room with a whiteboard and a bunch of other people, instead of in a room with the echo chamber of your own mind?
Yeah.
So what has that been like for you?
So the plus side is when you say a bad idea out loud, it's like immediately rejected. So you don't have to spend like days going down a hole where you're like, oh, this sucks. Oh, okay. Like, I'm not getting anywhere. You get that immediately. So you don't even bother.
That could save you a lot of dumb chapters that have to be taken out later. I see how that could be beneficial.
But you did have to like have a silly idea in front of a group of people that you respect. So it's like it's a mix. But I will say that I really do like it. I kind of thought, you know, I think one of the first reasons that I was like a novelist, you know, I was interested in writing for TV before when I was younger, but found it really, really difficult to kind of break into the industry. And I was like, well, you know what, I'm probably better suited as a novelist anyway, because like I just have a lot of control over the thing and it's mine, and you know, no one can tell me what to do about it. But I
love that aspect of novel writing myself. As somebody who has dictatorial tendencies, it's pretty wonderful to be able to command my own world.
Yes, I can be very, very much like a dictator. That, you know, and it's fine. But like, but with TV, there are benefits to that too. You know, you know, a couple of people have asked me, do I recommend it? And I do. I think it's good to work with a group of people. Mm-hmm. You know, if it's a really smart group, then they say things that you kind of didn't even think of, and you get, you know, it's really, really helpful. I'm always like, you know, there's like a strict hierarchy in a writer's room, so I'm new, so I'm always at the bottom. So it's not like what I say goes ever. So a lot of the time I'm just
so far.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. A lot of the time, mostly I'm just like, yeah, that's a great idea. You know? I'm like, and then
I agree with what she said. Yeah,
exactly.
Well, I think it's really cool. I think it's really cool, and I love that it wasn't where you expected to be.
No.
But you know, that's the joy of the evolution of one's life, isn't it?
Yeah, and I also wanted to say, you reminded me, you know, about the Brits being the people who actually have the film rights to the story.
Yep.
That happened because of my my publisher, my British publisher, so my book publisher, which I thought was, you know, she had a previous life as a film scout, and is someone who really, really knows a lot of people. So it just, speaking of like surprising connections, or like you just your world's, you know, not going in the way that you expected. So,
Right.
you know, when I sold the book in the UK, I was like, that's great. And then it was also this bonus of like, oh, but she also knows these people who are into very good editor.
Just pause for a second. I'm sorry about that. I felt like I lost
So
connection.
so briefly. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, very handy to have an editor who also knows about knows how to get you a TV deal.
Yeah,
well done.
She's a great editor.
So I wanted to close with something. We can take the scope out from the book and into the world a little bit. So one of the things I love is to read the acknowledgments. Let me try that one more time. Acknowledgments in books. There's so much revealed in them, you know, and I also love it because I love seeing if you know anybody who I know, and you know who is like, you know, seeing Paul Beatty's name in there was great, and like, you know, like, oh, you good person to have as a mentor and somebody working on your book. But I think that I found that one of the most interesting lines in a book is the last line of the acknowledgments, because it's a special place. You know, you're reserving that last line for somebody or that you care about in a particular way. And you mentioned your grandfather, Harry, who was the former police commissioner for community affairs for New York. And you spoke about his influence on this book. And I got interested, and so I Googled him, and because I wanted to see, I was like, well, that's about, like, when was he who under whose administration was he commissioner for community affairs? What is a commissioner for community affairs? You know, I kind of wanted to learn more about it, and what came up was an article from 1981 from the New York Times that was about a police shooting that had happened where a police officer on duty had shot what appeared to be, you could gather from the article, a mentally disturbed man who had been running through traffic waving a gun at people that turned out to not be a real gun, which the officer didn't, you know, nobody realized until after he had killed him. He was cleared, and the article, reading that article from today's culture, from what's happening in American policing right now, from what 2020 looked like, and then reading this article from, I was going to say 30 years ago, but it's 40 years ago. The tone, it was from you could feel that it was from a completely different time. The article was all about how painful and hard it is to be a police officer. There was one line in there where, like, somebody representing a coalition of Black attorneys was saying, hey, you know, by the way, it tends to be people of color who are usually shot by the police, but it was kind of buried, you know, like 10 paragraphs down. And then your grandfather was quoted, you know, saying that, you know, this man was cleared of all charges and that it was obviously, he acted appropriately for his training. And, you know, I didn't even know what to do with that piece of information, other than that I wanted to bring it to the end of our conversation as a way of opening up the conversation to what's happening in the world today. Just that you were connected. I don't know. I don't even know how to connect the dots on all of that. Other than that, I feel that I would be remiss, and you and I discussed talking about this, to not talk about this current moment in American politics, this previous year of American politics. And you and I were slated to have this conversation on Wednesday, but elected to postpone it because of the violent coup attempt in Washington, D.C., led by our president against our country. Which is not, I think, where any of us were planning to be. Well, I mean, I think actually a lot of us were picturing this because it feels like it's the inevitable result, and we've been saying for years this is what he's leading toward. But I wanted to know if you wanted to speak about that, and what it was like as a Black author having a book published was it late 2019, like having your book out in 2020, how that changed the way your book was read, how it changed the trajectory of your career. Just anything you want to talk about anywhere in that realm. Take whatever tendril I've offered here and take it wherever you want to go with it.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you know, when the book was published, and things started to, you know, there was a lot of like, oh, did you anticipate, like, how did you know, or whatever. Like, there was this idea that like I had some sort of foresight, maybe like because of like how I was, how I engaged with politics in the book. But no, I mean, it's just, if anything, it's just looking at history. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I think that what you're saying about reading an article from the 80s that indicates like the same things have been happening, and only it's that attitudes are changing slightly, maybe, or people are coming to some sort of consciousness or reckoning, but the same shootings are happening, the same, you know, the police are, you know, Black men in particularly are disproportionately killed by police officers in this country. Like, it's still
20% of 20% of all unarmed people. Yeah, 20% of Black people killed by police officers are unarmed. Sorry, I just wanted to explain that. And the percentage of Black people killed by police officers as opposed to white people is disproportionately off the charts. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No. So this idea that, like, I just don't feel, I think that when my book came out, my feeling was more, I'm talking about the present, but, you know, it's also like, I guess I just felt very aware of what I'm saying now, which is that I was aware that all of these trends have been really present in American society forever. And it's only, the only thing that's really changing is like public perception, I think. But like, for generations now, you know, Black people have been saying like, this is, hey, there's a problem here. And, you know, there's only now a little bit of response that's like, you know what, you're right. I mean, you know, I feel that in the last 4 years, we kind of have had, like, it's just that feeling. This is also difficult to talk about. I think that's probably why I wrote a book. It's difficult to be succinct and to be insightful. But, you know, like, this feeling that after Trump was elected, people were like, this is dangerous. You know, he's inciting really dangerous, or he's fomenting really dangerous ideas. And there are a lot of Republicans who are, they're just as bad, because they're allowing these ideas to kind of be damaging. And I think that people, I don't understand really what happened. Like, people have been saying that for 4 years, and then now in the last like week, you know, that there's a surge, there's this behavior like, oh, who could possibly have expected this? Like, anyone.
Literally everybody. This is all we've been talking about.
And so it feels like just being like a Black American, it feels like that same 4 years, except like on a much longer timeline, where it's like, who could have anticipated this? Oh, like, this
is not okay.
It's only someone had been saying for generations white supremacy is a problem in this country. we could have been saved so much grief, you know. And it's like, but yeah. So I don't know, it felt like really that sort of repeating of history feeling, and maybe people responding to me as if I had some insight, but not really. I think that you know, the thing about history, not knowing your history and being doomed to repeat it. You know, I think that if I have any insight, it's to kind of look at our past. So, and I think you can pretty easily, you know, if you're paying attention, forecast into the future. I mean, you know, I'm still on guard with everything that has happened. You know, I'm personally, I know that there's controversy around it, but I'm glad that Twitter deplatformed Trump. I'm glad that he was banned. I know that people think that that's like, you know, that can be democracy, that can crumble democracy. But I think, no, you know, like, you can't have such
democracy was just crumbling itself thanks to Twitter.
Yeah. No, I just think, you know, like, you can't have like an
Yeah.
outward, like just so permissive a society where like people who mean to destroy it are permitted to do so. At some point you have to be like,
Well,
no, you
do you
can't
remember during the Rwandan genocide, one of the things that kept happening during the Rwandan genocide is that one of the things that was being begged of the West at that point was, please take out these radio stations. You know, like you have to take. This would be so simple, like just shut down these radio stations, because these radio stations are broadcasting 24 hours a day. It is time for you to go kill your neighbors. It is time for you to go kill your neighbors. Like, stop the megaphone, you know? And that's what I keep thinking about with what's happened with social media and President Trump, is that it took senators hiding under their desks and a siege of the Capitol to say, maybe we should take this guy's microphone away.
Yeah.
Do you think like, and what's shocking to me is that it took that, and that it took a literal siege on the Capitol for a bunch of Republicans to say, this guy's gone too far. I'm like, really? He's gone too far now? This is what was too far?
This is the moment. But then
everything else was okay up until now?
Yeah.
You guys were cool with it, right?
Yeah.
Right up until now.
Ted Cruz, like just right up and like still, you know, tweeting a thoughts and prayers kind of thing. And it's like, you are now just challenging the election. Like you went back, like it's just, you incited this. How dare you kind of pretend that, like, I don't know. It feels very, it's infuriating. But I'm glad that he doesn't have his favorite, you know.
Well, it's just like in the debates where they finally just had to turn his microphone off. It's like, you know, this person will not stop themselves, you know, and this is dangerous, and people are going to get killed, and people have been killed.
Yeah.
And we have been saying this for a long time. People are going to be killed. One of the things that I found, one of the statistics that's so horrifying, is when you see every municipality where Trump ever did a rally, immediately after he leaves, there's a massive, like it's on record in police reports, uptick in hate crimes. Violence will happen. If he comes to your town, violence will happen. People will get hurt. And that's who he is. And that's what he's been selling all along. And it's shocking to me, but this is the level of denial. And this is also the level of how power wants to hold on to itself.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what your book is about too. You know, the lengths that power will go to hold on to power, and the casualties of that.
Yeah, that's good too. God, you're just giving me some
way Marie. I got to tell you, I studied it. I didn't just read it. I studied it, and I also know I've read it more recently than you have. You know, this is I'm more into it with it right now. This often happens to me when people are interviewing me. I'm like, I haven't read that book in years.
Much more recently. Yeah. People don't realize that either, but I'm just like, I'm actually probably the worst person to ask what the book is about anymore.
Well, look, I want to thank you. I've loved talking to you. I've loved reading you. I'm excited for you about whatever it is in any form that you end up creating. I'm delighted for your success. It's a joy. It's always a joy to watch. I'm somebody who gets high on watching people succeed, and it's just been a pleasure over the last few weeks to dive into your life story and listen to all your interviews and read your book and be able to bring your book to my community and have them read it as well. And I see all the hearts going up right now that they love you.
Thank you for doing this, for meeting with me, for talking to me, for introducing your community to me and my book. I appreciate that, and it's this has been great.
It's been I can assure you, it has not been a hardship. It has been my absolute joy. And I just want to close with, at the very end of your book, Marie, the book is written as a letter to her sons. She wants them to know who she was in case she gets killed, which it looks like she's going into great danger at the end of the book. And there's a beautiful sort of end of the book where she says that she wants them to be good Americans. And what that means to her, and the intelligence and the compassion to be good activists, to work for justice, and earlier in the book, she says to them, I don't want you to be moral absolutists. And I think there's, by the time we reach the end of the book, it's so obvious that you are not a moral absolutist. Nobody who can be a good novelist could ever be a moral absolutist. You have to be able to look at every facet. But it's also really clear that you're a good American.
I try. That bald thing, I love this country, so my right to criticize it.
I agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. And that comes very clearly across. So, and that's I think what it means to be a good American right now. And so thanks for modeling that for us. And it's just been an honor and a delight to talk to you. And I wish you all the best. I still can't get over how young you are, how gifted you are. And I'm excited I'll be a fan forever. So just let me know whatever you're up to.
I will.
All right. Thank you so much, Lauren. Thanks. It was great talking to you. Bye. Bye, everybody. Bye.